Hi, welcome to the Stories Beside channel. Enjoy watching. William stopped in front of the office. He took in more air and knocked on the door. Yes, he heard the energetic voice of the agency director. When he heard the invitation, he turned the doorknob and stepped confidently inside. The office turned out to be a large and bright room. Behind a huge, massive desk sat the director himself. He was a solid man in his 50s, with a kind smile. As soon as William saw the owner, he immediately realized that this was an intelligent and businesslike man who knew how to do business and loved money. That's why he was relieved in his heart. He would surely be able to make a deal with him. William came over, sat down on the table, and smiled broadly and said, "Good afternoon, Frank. My name is William, and I am here on very important business." The director's name. He read the plaque that hung on the office door. When William read the surname of the director of the holiday organization agency, he involuntarily smiled. Did Frank sit down? He thought it was funny. But now, the fate of the boy depended on this man. And so William did not delay and got straight to the point. "I have a rather delicate question for you. You see, other agencies have turned me down. I'm relying on you. It's a matter of life and death. My fate is now in your hands. Frank, here's the thing." But before William could finish his sentence, he exclaimed cheerfully, "Don't even dream about it." William stopped talking in surprise and stared at the man. "Don't look at me like that. I know exactly what will happen next. Not the first year in this chair." And my answer: "No, sweetheart. My girls are not going to the bachelor party. Are you out of your mind to come to me? To the best children's party planner in the business? You're in the wrong place with an offer like that. We only do parties for little kids. No, of course, we can also congratulate an adult, but as an exception, and all within the bounds of decency," said Veselov. "Is everything clear to you?" "Yes, I had no such thoughts," was surprised by the reaction from the cheerful William. "I just want to. We don't rent costumes either." Frank interrupted him again. "Again, we've had a bad experience. The only time I made concessions, there was one sitting here in front of me begging me tearfully. And what did I do? Pity the man. I have a kind soul, and people take advantage of that. I finally got my suit back. And what do you think?" That William translated, not realizing what the story had to do with him. And that was it. The man waved his hands. They returned the costume of Little Red Riding Hood with a hole in the most delicate place. Can you imagine? He blushed with annoyance. And the girls then perform, so that he their costumes in front of children. So no, young man, goodbye. I can't help you. And the man pretended to study very important documents. "Frank, wait a minute, you William. You were outraged, at least hear me out. I have urgent business, for which I will pay well. By the way," he looked seriously at once cheerful, "but please do not interrupt me. Outline." The man was interested. "I am ready to listen to you carefully. Here's the thing." Slightly embarrassed, spoke William. "I need a girl, an actress without a costume." "Well, that's out of the question." Did he roar? And his eyes widened with indignation. They looked like they were about to pop out of their orbits. "Do you realize where you're going with a request like that? We only employ decent girls. They have families, husbands, children. This isn't a brothel, after all. What do you mean you need an actress without a costume?" Was Siva so angry that he even started stuttering? "Yes, calm down, Frank," William shouted. "You've got it all wrong again. Let me finish. I don't want a naked girl. But she doesn't have to be in a balloon or violin costume. Yeah, we don't have costumes like that, mistress. Did you sit in your nose? What kind of violin stables? But you understand violin suits, and fine, I don't want any. I want your actress to play the part of my fiancé." William was finally able to state his request. "I don't understand. Why? What happened to your fiancé?" You could see that since the jolly one was really curious. "Nothing. I don't have one at all. You know, my parents are really worried about it. and to calm them down, I told them that I have a fiancée, that I've been with her for a long time, and we're getting married. How was I supposed to know they'd want to come meet her? And in 2 days, they'll be here. And that I'd tell them there's no fiancé, that I lied. That's why I want to rent a girl. William said, and realized how absurd it all sounded. Well, maybe you could ask some girls you know, maybe someone from work. The director asked sympathetically. I can't. I don't have any women I know. Yes, did the strength. Oh, this modern youth, but still cannot help you. There's no bride for hire service in the press. And the time is New Year's Eve holidays, matinees. All the girls are busy. We don't have any free ones, as they say. You know Christmas. Well, please, Frank, think about it. I'm prepared to pay very well, really very well. Trying to persuade the cheerful William, a flame of greed lit up in the headmaster's eyes, but quickly faded, and he said in a firm, non-accepting tone, I wish I could help you, but I can't. I'm sorry, and good day to you. Of course, from the cheerful Frank was very fond of money and would be only too glad to earn some, especially on Christmas Eve. But he was afraid that this young man might be bribed by competitors who wanted to ruin the reputation of his fine agency. Frank glanced again at the visitor, who continued to sit back in his chair, and begged to look at him some more. And I repeat, I say again, there is nothing I can do to help you. Goodbye. William sighed and walked out of the office, immersed in his thoughts for 2 days, and his parents would be in his apartment eagerly awaiting to meet his fiancée. But he didn't have a fiancée or even a girl he knew. He was walking down the corridor and thinking how to find a way out of this difficult situation. Suddenly, the door opened abruptly in one of the offices. If William did not dodge, it would definitely crack him on the forehead. And a pretty miniature girl flew out of the room. She was in such a hurry, it turned out she couldn't see anyone in front of her. The young man said grudgingly, actually, it is possible, and more attentive. The girl took the phone away from her ear and whispered, for God's sake, sorry, and then returned to the conversation. How can it? You're a cab, which means you don't have any cars available. Let me pay double the price. I need to leave urgently. Do you understand or not? It's very urgent, very urgent. No, I can't wait half an hour. She listened and looked at the phone for a few more seconds and said angrily, what am I supposed to do if you don't have cars? What kind of day is this? Everything is upside down. After all, I was standing next to him the whole time listening to the conversation. Suddenly, he suggested, let me give you a ride. It's a long way. And the guy did not have time to finish the sentence because the stranger grabbed him by the arm and dragged him to the exit of the building. God sent you to me. Please, young man, just take me. I'll pay you. It's very urgent. William didn't even resist. Only on the porch, said the girl. Wait, first of all, let go of my hand. I need to get my keys. And secondly, where do you have far to go? Not at all to me. There's a kindergarten 2 steps away from the bus stop, you know. That's where I'm going. William was surprised. The stranger seemed too young to have children. Maybe a nephew. Why do you need a kindergarten? Asked the boy. She looked at him with a surprised look, but answered, my son called from the kindergarten. Liam has done something wrong again. I have to run, sort it out. About the territory. My name is Kathy, by the way, the girl said suddenly. I'm William. Nice to meet you. Without taking his eyes off the road, the boy said, oh, William, here's the garden brake. Kathy shouted so loudly and so unexpectedly that William braked sharply. Kathy, what are you doing? We could have had an accident. He shook his head. Sorry, it's nerves, the girl said. Every day there are some problems, you know. What about your husband? Doesn't he help you at all? But I don't have a husband. Kathy took a deep breath and got out of the car. Thank you. You've been a great help. How much do I owe you? Oh, it's nothing. Nothing. William hesitated half a word when he saw that his passenger was already running towards the kindergarten door. So of course, she couldn't hear him. The guy was surprised at how nimbly she ran in her high heels, paling him on the sidewalk, jogging passersby. William had already started the cars, was about to move off, as suddenly the phone rang, called from work. So the man long and hard explained to his colleague where to find the necessary documents. And then he also took the same amount of time to find out why these papers were needed at all. In the course of the conversation, it became clear that it was not these documents that were needed, but others, and they were in the office of the manager. Finally, William finished the conversation and, throwing the phone on the passenger seat, wanted to move, but this time he noticed Kathy. She was holding the hand of a boy who was struggling to walk. The guy didn't realize how he opened the door and shouted to Kathy, "Come on, hurry up, I'll let you down." The girl began to look around, not realizing what was calling her. But noticing William, she smiled and led her son to the car with a quick step. "You're still here. I thought you had already left," the girl said, surprised. "No, I didn't have time. I was on the phone for a long time. And then I saw you coming back." The guy smiled, trying to see the boy in the rearview mirror. There was something about the kid's face. So William couldn't help but wonder, what's wrong with the kid's face? "He's just a little dreamer," he said of Kathy with a strange intonation. "What do you mean?" I asked in surprise, you see. And only now I saw the boy's face. It was streaked with green. Not all of it, though. Only his cheeks, chin, and forehead were covered with a hat. But from under it, a few more stripes of the same color could be seen. "Well, handsome," said William, barely restraining a smile. But when he saw Kathy's displeased look, he tried to be serious again. "So what happened?" he asked. The girl only opened her mouth to answer her, interrupted by the little boy. "Uncle, do you really like it? I don't pronounce it a little." Words mumbled the boy. It was obvious that he wanted to say something else. But his mother looked at him so sternly that Liam immediately changed his mind. And what happened was that Liam found the markers with displeasure, said Kathy with the word educator. She was distracted for a minute, and in the minute he managed to color himself. But that's half the trouble. And here's what the parents of the two girls who were also waved all over their faces with markers have to say. I'm even afraid to imagine where he found them. William wondered. The girl sighed and said, "I don't know. I only know that the markers are alcoholic and it will be quite difficult to wash it all off. And it's on the eve of a matinee. Snowflakes with battle green coloring," said Kathy, and involuntarily smiled Liam. Seeing that the mother picked up and smiling, hugged her neck and said, "You do not worry, they will be the most beautiful. It's a costume, Christmas trees. Look at me." And he pulled away from his mother so she could get a better look at his creation. "See, the green ones are the branches of the Christmas tree. And the toys Janet didn't have time to draw me. And I drew them all flowers and balls. You know, it's beautiful." Kathy, looking at his son, only covered his mouth with his hand and slowly shook his head from side to side. William, driving the car, was laughing because he couldn't hold back any longer. "We'll talk to you at home," Kathy said, and looked at her son sternly. "Kathy, tell me the exact address." The girl named the street and the houses. The man exclaimed, "Yes, we are almost neighbors. I live 2 houses down. And you know what the most amazing thing is?" He looked at the girl in the rearview mirror and, meeting her questioning gaze, continued, "I've never met you before." She was about to reply, but her phone rang. "Yes, David." "No, I'm sorry. It slipped my mind. Can I do it tomorrow?" "But David, I got it. I'll be there soon." Kathy replied bitterly and disconnected the phone. She turned to the boy and said, "Liam, I'm taking you to Aunt Maria's. You can stay with her until tonight." "But I don't want to go to her." The child began to whimper. "Liam, I have no one else to leave you with. I have to go to work," she said. "Who is Aunt Maria?" William asked. For some reason, he liked the son and his mother very much. They were somehow real and alive, and that attracted him. "This is our neighbor," the girl quickly explained. "I leave my son with her when I have to go to work. In return, I help her, bringing her groceries, cleaning, cooking." Clearly mumbled the guy. "And you have no relatives?" "No," Kathy answered sharply, and William realized that she was not comfortable talking about it. "I'm sorry if I offended you. I didn't mean to," calmly and quietly said the young man. "It's all right." Kathy also tried to make her voice more friendly. "Okay, William, our entrance is next. Thank you so much. You just saved me today," said the girl, turned to her son and commanded Liam, "Come on, come out quickly. I'm already late. Can I give you a ride to work?" Suddenly, William asked, without expecting it of himself. "I wouldn't mind," Kathy wondered. "Don't you have anything to do?" But it turns out that it all smiled the guy. "So I'm waiting for you." "Yes, of course," she said. She took her son by the hand and with a quick step walked towards the entrance. The boy was funny, sitting next to him and barely keeping up with his mother. William looked after the couple and smiled involuntarily. 15 minutes later, Kathy opened the front door and got into the car. "Shall we go? Unless, of course, you've changed your mind." No, of course we're going fast," William said. "Back to where we met you." She remained silent and just nodded, leaning back in her chair and covering her eyes. But William couldn't drive in silence. He wanted to find out as much as he could about Kathy. So he asked, "What do you do for a living?" She hesitated for a moment. The question stumped her, but she soon answered. "To be honest, it is difficult for me to answer this question unequivocally. Actually, I'm an accountant at David's firm. But that's officially. And unofficially, I am a secretary and cleaner, and sometimes even an animator," she said and sighed sadly. "How is it an animator?" surprised William. "I think you came out of the office of the cheerful director of the holiday agency. So my boss, David and Frank, childhood friends," explained. Kathy was silent for a while, and then continued. "Sometimes when the fun one has a problem with the animators, my boss kind of rents me out. So here I am entertaining the kids in different costumes." She was quiet again for a minute. "What did you do of the fun stuff? Did you want to book a party?" "To be honest, I don't recommend using his services. His girls don't drink much, he skips out, and they might steal something." "No, we didn't have a deal. I had a rather delicate request for him," the guy said. "What was it? If it's no secret." "Of course." Kathy looked at William in surprise and added, as if apologizing for her curiosity, "Don't get me wrong. It's just that, knowing the man's level of greed, I'm very curious what you offered him that even the cheapskate refused." She laughed. "It's just that we all know that if you're fun for money, you'll do anything. You see, I wanted to rent a bride." William tried to answer as casually as possible, but in his opinion, he failed. "I mean a rented bride." "Why?" Kathy didn't even try to hide her amazement. "It's simple. My parents think I have a fiancé. They're coming over in 2 days to meet her, but I don't really have one." "Well, then tell me you don't have a fiancé. Why complicate things?" the girl asked. William thought for a moment. He didn't understand how to explain to his new acquaintance that his parents loved him very much and were incredibly worried that he was still alone. "The thing is that if my mom finds out that I don't have a fiancé, she will start matchmaking the daughter of her best friend again. But this girl is not my type." William took a deep breath and remembered Natasha, whom his mother tried to match him up with every chance she got. "How messed up is that?" Kathy stretched, trying to hold back a laugh. The new acquaintance seemed to her a serious, determined, and courageous man. Therefore, this situation seemed to her funny and even somewhat childish. How he is such a strong man cannot explain to his mother that he is not ready to start a family. Kathy, "Well, really, nothing funny," said William, and a little resentfully. "You just don't know my mom." "Well, yes," said Kathy. "By the way, did you offer out of funny money? Is he grasping for every dime?" Yes, of course, replied William, and briefly recounted Kathy's conversation with the agency director. Okay, Kathy thought for a moment. And tell me, please, what will your fiancé have to do? Your mother will not check how serious your relationship is, will she? Well, that is, the meeting will be without intimacy, right? Asked the girl, trying not to laugh. Well, of course not. Not even a sleepover. Mom thinks that Helen and I do not live together yet. With who? Helen. Excuse me, Kathy. Yeah, that's the name of my fictional fiancé, according to legend. Got it, she said, and then she paused and said, listen, leave your phone number. You helped me out today, so I'll try not to be indebted either. I'll try to talk to my friend, but no promises. I'll call you later. Tonight's the night. Kathy, I'll be very grateful to you. You're so helpful. William was glad because he didn't believe that his question would be solved somehow. He dictated his number. Kathy wrote it down and hurriedly left the car and ran towards the building. William decided to go shopping and buy gifts for his parents. A few hours later, Kathy literally persuaded her friend to help her new acquaintance to live. I'll do it. Come on, don't you need money? Moreover, the guy is cool, calm, and a great car. Kathy, if he's such a great guy, why don't you go yourself? You'll play the part of the bride, and you'll make money. I think you and Bones could really use it. No, what did you say to Kathy? She actually really wanted to play the part of William's fiancé, although I didn't understand why. But she was scared, probably because she really liked the guy. So why not? My friend wouldn't let it go. I can't have a life, especially with no one to leave Liam with. Kathy was lying. Imagine, if I come to the meeting with a child, William's parents will definitely not be happy that their future brides already have a son. Why don't you go? You're pretty, he's cute. Maybe it'll work out. Kathy, no, I can't. We just made up with Ben yesterday. Kathy sighed. She knew Nancy loved her boyfriend, but they were always fighting and making up. And if they were in a reconciliation period now, it would be impossible to talk her friend into it. She gave up. Okay. Sorry, of course, Kathy said quickly, hearing the menacing expression in the receiver. I'm really glad you two made up. I just wanted to help that guy so badly. I thought you'd agree. Well, what's the problem? Help him yourself. Nancy, I almost yelled at you, but I said I can't. Kathy, think of a better excuse to convince Kostya to the neighbor and run to your William, Nancy said sternly. Well, first of all, he's not mine. And secondly, Maria can't sit with Liam. She's busy. Kathy was blatantly lying. I wonder what sort of urgent business that old woman might have. I've never hated a friend's roommate in my life. So she said those words with a little bit of anger. Nancy, how should I know? She doesn't report to me. She said she couldn't. So if she can't, Kathy cut her off. And when you say you need a bride, then play in 2 days. Nancy spoke quickly. Look, you're lucky. We've got Ben's day off, and we'll take him to our place, especially since Liam loves my Ben, and the boy needs to socialize with men. That sentence almost brought Kathy to tears. Lately, she often heard that her son just needs male company. But where could she get that companionship? Kathy didn't know. Liam's father had never seen him. The girl dated him for a short time. It was her first true love. But it turned out that the man was just on a business trip and soon left town. When Kathy found out that she was pregnant, she tried to find him, but she could not. True, Nancy then found his page in the social network, but it turned out he had a girlfriend. He'd been in a relationship for a long time. And with Kathy, he was just having a brief affair. She decided to forget about this man, but Nancy persuaded to write to him and tell him about her pregnancy. The girl decided to, but he did not respond immediately, nor after a day, nor after a month. Kathy understood everything and did not bother him anymore, deciding to raise her son alone. Of course, the doctor and her friend asked her opinion about the turnover, but the girl firmly decided that she would give birth. Then Nancy said, You know, I was sure you wouldn't have an abortion. But I had to ask you. Don't worry, I'll help you. You're the closest thing I have to a friend," she added in a quiet voice. Kathy and Nancy had been best friends since kindergarten, always visiting each other. Then they went to school and the girls' lives began to go through a rough patch. First, Nancy's dad was found in an alley with his head bashed in. But it was not like a banal robbery, because the money, wedding ring, and a nice watch were in place. The investigator had many versions of what had happened, but Nancy's mom didn't believe in any of them. She was so distraught with grief that she lost track of time and fell out of reality. The woman completely stopped paying attention to her daughter, and Kathy's parents felt very sorry for the girl. "Kathy, if Nancy wants to spend the night with us," said Molly, Kathy's mom, "just tell her to tell Mommy." "Mommy, are you the best?" Kathy exclaimed, hugging her mom. When Kathy told her wife that she could spend the night, she was very happy. She could no longer stay with her mom all the time, who was starting to turn to the bottle more and more often. She would get drunk and start blaming everyone for her husband's death. And worst of all, she threw nasty things at Nancy. "It would be better if Father were alive, and you were gone in tears," her mother shouted to her. "Mother, what are you talking about?" Nancy tried to contradict her somehow, but she quickly interrupted her and kept shouting at her, throwing more and more accusations. Nancy loved her mom and felt sorry for her. She missed her cheerful father and their close-knit, happy family. She didn't want to believe that the old life was over. Nancy was having a hard time coping with the loss of her dad from her mother. There was no support. So Kathy's parents' suggestion actually saved her. Thanks to Kathy and us parents, Nancy was able to move on with her life. But she always waited for her beloved, kind mother to be the same as before. It made her run home every day after school to check on her mother and tell her about herself. But every day her mother's condition was getting worse. She was sinking lower and lower. She was not interested in what was going on in her daughter's life. So the girl's heart was torn to pieces. Despite this, Nancy studied well, did well in school, and was just a great good girl. At the same time, everyone at school knew that her mom was constantly drinking, and she herself lived with her parents, a friend. But nobody interfered in her life. Kathy. Her parents dressed her, bought everything she needed, and even gave her money for school needs. Nancy realized that without them, she would definitely end up in an orphanage. She was grateful for their support and care. In fact, strangers to her people. Therefore, the girl tried to please them in any way possible. She always helped her wife around the house, cooked, cleaned, and did everything they asked her to do. "Nancy, you must be tired. Come on, go and have a rest," Molly used to tell her, but she only told her aunt. "Natasha, it's not difficult for me. I'm only happy to help you," and she said it very sincerely. She wanted to thank her saviors, but she couldn't do it any other way. When the girls were 13 years old, Kathy's father died. He was a young man of 42 years old who just didn't wake up one morning. There had been a cardiac arrest. At this point, Nancy was terribly worried about Kathy's mom. She had already seen the woman break down and sink after her husband's death. She was terrified that Molly wouldn't make it either. But Natalia didn't break down, but instead pulled herself together and kept her composure. At her husband's funeral, Molly didn't cry, but she only feigned calmness so as not to scare the girls and show them all the despair and pain. Then she withdrew from Kathy and Nancy and began to disappear to work all the time. Nancy took over all the housework. She cooked, did laundry, checked. The girl had almost stopped visiting her own mother because she had hit rock bottom and turned the apartment into a brothel where there were constantly many strangers to Nancy. Kathy had a hard time accepting her father's death. She withdrew into herself. She cried a lot and read a lot. Of course, she loved books before, but now they became her constant companions. Books helped the girl to detach herself from everything and be transported to a fairy tale world where there is no resentment and pain. She lived other people's lives together with the heroes of the novels to forget about her loss. Those around her could not understand how such completely different girls could be friends. Kathy was a romantic, completely unadjusted to life. And Nancy was a simple girl who, for her 13 years, managed to face a lot of problems and successfully overcome them. But fate is a strange thing, and she tied them with a strong thread for many years. But the girls' lives continued. They finished the 9th grade. Nancy went to study to be a hairdresser, and Kathy wanted to study until the last grade and go to university. But still, she decided to go to the vocational school that her friend only to become an accountant. After all, in her class, she had only Nancy, and Kathy did not communicate with anyone else. When the girls entered the school, Nancy quickly made friends. She was cheerful, and everyone liked her. Kathy, on the other hand, could not find a common language with her classmates. "Kathy, why did such a handsome guy wanted to meet you today?" Nancy stretched out, lying in her bed at Kathy's house. Yes, but she was already embarrassed. "Kathy, I told you I don't want to date just anyone. I want to fall in love once and for all, like in romance novels." She rolled her eyes dreamily. Nancy understood her friend and accepted her for who she was. She loved Kathy very much and was grateful to have this person in her life. The girls started working part-time jobs early on. They were promoters, picked fruits and vegetables in stores, and went to the fields to pick strawberries or dill. During this time, Kathy's mother had little interest in the girls' lives, but she kept them fully provided for. It wasn't uncommon for Molly to come home late at night or go out on weekends. "Kathy, I used to ask Mom where she was all the time. She said she was working hard." The girl trusted her because she was sure her mother didn't drink. She never smelled of alcohol. But the girl noticed some oddities in the woman. For example, she began to dress differently. One day, Kathy met a neighbor who asked, "Kathy, Mom's not sick?" "No. Why would you think that?" The girl was very surprised and a little frightened. "It's just that I saw her with some people who were all in white, and I thought she was with the doctors," the neighbor answered. And after thinking about it, she added, "Okay, she's not sick, and that's good." Kathy was excited about talking to the neighbor, so she quickly went home. The girl wanted to talk to her mother, but she was not home. In the evening, she told her friend about her worry. "Kathy, be sure to talk to your mother," Nancy said worriedly. "Strange people in white outfits." The girl agreed. She, too, didn't understand who these people in white the neighbor was talking about could be. That same evening, when Molly came home, the daughter started a conversation with her mother. But as soon as she heard about the people in white coats, she immediately became nervous and told her daughter that it was none of her business. "You know I've been pulling you and your friend alone for years. Tell me, do I ask you questions?" "No, you stay out of my business. It's my life, you understand," Mom almost yelled at Kathy. Then she grabbed her jacket and ran out the door. "Mom, where are you going?" Kathy tried to catch up with her mother, but when she ran out into the street, she was already out of sight. "Kathy, I went back to the apartment. On the doorstep was waiting for her upset Nancy." "Kathy, Molly's right. She's been keeping me for a long time, even though she shouldn't. I guess I'm a guest. Let me go tomorrow." "Where are you going?" Kathy was crying. "It's impossible to live at your place. Stay, it doesn't matter. I'll sort it out somehow." "Nancy, don't pay attention to what your mom says. I don't know what's gotten into her. She really loves you, and she's glad you're staying with us. Don't leave me, Nancy." Kathy cried harder than ever. "That's it. Just don't cry." Nancy put her arms around her friend and began to stroke her head. "I'm not leaving you. I'll talk to Mom tomorrow, and we'll work things out through the tears," the girl said. They talked most of the night and fell asleep only towards morning. They wondered what would happen in the future, dreamed, and in the morning they quickly left for college. The girls were not worried that Molly did not spend the night at home. It had happened very often lately. But when they came home from school, they sounded the alarm because Kathy's mom was still not home. "Nancy, is it just me, or did Mom never come?" Kathy stretched out. Yes, I think she never came either. Nancy had already gone to the kitchen and noticed that nothing had changed there either. There were dishes in the sink from the morning. No one else had eaten, and the fridge was untouched. Kathy did not answer her friend. She quickly ran to her mother's room. The bed had been dispatched. All the things were in their places. The girl opened the closet doors and breathed a sigh of relief when she saw all the clothes hanging. She was afraid that her mom had left home, resentful of her. After that thought, Kathy had another thought in her head, and she quickly grabbed her phone. She dialed her mom's number, but it was disconnected. Nancy, the phone is off. Kathy sank to the floor. What if something happened? I'm really scared. Well, calm down. It doesn't mean anything. The phone could just be dead. Nancy tried to speak as calmly as possible. So, what are we gonna do? Where do you think she might be? We have to make sure she's okay. Kathy couldn't calm down, so she peppered her hand with questions. Hey, do you have Molly's work number? Maybe check there. Nancy, it's evening. Kathy objected. What's the point of calling work? Well, look, you and I stopped by Molly's work. Remember when she forgot her phone? Nancy tried to help her friend. Now, remember, there was a guard booth on the first floor. Kathy nodded. And if we can't get through to your mom's office, we'll call the booth there. Agreed. Asked Nancy. But I don't have the guard's cell phone. That way we can find him easily. Your mom has a notebook where she writes down all the phone numbers she needs. I think I saw her in the hallway. Answered Nancy and quickly ran to find the notebook. Come on, take the phone. Calling the office, and I'll find the number. Kathy took the phone, dialed her mother's number once more, but it was still unavailable. Then she dialed the phone number in Molly's office, but no one answered. This was not surprising since it was almost 10:00 p.m. Well, asked Nancy, who had just returned from the hallway. Kathy answers me. Mom became the head. Let's call the guard. I found the number for the gatehouse. What am I going to tell them? Nancy looked at her friend thoughtfully and smiled slightly. Kathy was like that, kind, reliable, smart, but completely unfit for life. Okay, let me make the call myself. Nancy picked up her phone and started dialing the number of the walk-in from her notebook. After a couple seconds, she heard a stern male voice. Hello. Nancy was startled by the man's gruff tone, but she quickly pulled herself together and said, Good evening. This is the builder. That's right. Is the office closed now? Will it open at 9:00 a.m.? The security guard said quickly and was about to hang up, but Nancy reacted quickly and shouted, Wait a second. Hold on, please. 1 second. Don't hang up. What is it now? Well, my mom is your chief accountant. Started telling my wife. And today, she did not come from work. The girl tried to explain everything to the guard as accurately and quickly as possible. You know, I'm really worried. Can you tell me what time she left work and whether she was even in the office today? The man hummed and said, You know, girl, I can't give you such information. I'm not allowed to. Man, well, please, I'm really worried. It was Nancy's mom who almost cried. The girl's excitement was transmitted to her friend, who clung to the phone. On the other side, well, all right. Speak the name, your mom's name, her position. The man on the other end of the wire took pity on the girl. Molly is the chief accountant. As quickly and clearly as possible, said Nancy, and waited for an answer. A rustling of paper came to the girl. Apparently, the man was leafing through a magazine and repeating under his nose, so. Listen, friend, said the guard, switching with the girl on the first name. Something you got mixed up. We don't have any working for us, and the chief accountant's name is different. What's that? The girl was surprised. Check again. You've definitely had a good look. For some reason, the man was angered by her words, and he said angrily, What do you want me to do? I actually wanted to help you, and you so stretched the guard. I think I realized you were sent by someone to play a prank on me. Or is Sebastian testing me? Come clean. Then the man started cursing and yelling loudly. Nancy was frightened and hung up the phone. The girls sat in silence and looked at each other. After a while, Nancy said, "The security guard said that Aunt Molly doesn't work at their company and the head accountant's name is something else entirely." "I heard that, Nancy," replied Kathy very quietly, "but I don't see how that can be. I mean, she was taking money from somewhere." Nancy only helped her head in reply. "Nancy, and so for Mom, I'm afraid," said Kathy in a whisper and wrapped her arms around her knees. "First of all, let's calm down." "What do you mean, let's calm down?" Kathy screamed. "Mommy hasn't been home in over 24 hours, and I have no idea where to find her." "Kathy, let's go to bed now. It's getting late. We'll go to the police in the morning if your mom doesn't come back." But suddenly, she has a fiancé. Here she is in his living room. Nancy tried to convince her friend. True, she herself didn't believe what she was saying, but she really wanted to support Kathy. "What was life like for them?" "Through tears?" asked the girl. "She would have told me, warned me." "Well, maybe she was afraid to tell you. After all, you loved your daddy so much if it was Molly and was afraid you wouldn't accept her new man." "Kathy," I began to calm down thanks to my friend's words. The girls got into bed and started discussing Kathy and Mom's disappearance. I fell asleep unnoticed. As soon as Kathy woke up, she immediately ran to her mom's room to see if she was back. But everything in the room was the same. The bed was still sent out as well. "Nancy, Mom is still not here. Let's go to the police," said a frustrated Kathy. Yes, of course we will. What else are we going to do?" Immediately, her friend replied. The girls started to pull their jackets on, but suddenly Kathy's phone rang. She took it out with shaking hands and saw that the screen said Mom. "It's Mom," Kathy said anxiously. "Well, answer it," Nancy said hurriedly. But she saw that her friend was in shock, so she quickly grabbed the phone and shouted into the receiver, "Molly, where are you?" "It's okay, Molly. The girl is not Molly." "Nancy, I heard an unfamiliar voice." "My name is Miranda and I'm..." "Who are you? Where did you get your mom's phone from?" She grabbed my wife's phone and started yelling at her. "What's wrong with her? Where is she?" "Young lady, if you'll be quiet for a while and listen to me, I'll tell you everything." "Okay, I'm sorry." Kathy tried to calm down and control herself. "My name is Miranda. I'm a nurse at the regional hospital." Tears ran down Kathy's cheeks, but she continued to listen to the woman. "Yesterday, a woman was brought to us unconscious and without papers, so we couldn't talk to her or identify her. We recently found a cell phone in her things and just now charged it to the phone. And I found a number that's signed as her daughter. So I'm calling you." "Yes, thank you very much," Kathy said quietly. "That with my mom, they'll let me in to see her now. You see, she's in serious condition. So I can't tell you whether you can see her or not, but you must come to the hospital. We'll expect you in an hour with your mother's documents." "Yes, of course," agreed the girl. "Well, she is in the hospital with her mother." And with Nancy sprinkled questions, as from the horn of plenty. "Yes, in the regional," answered Kathy, and recounted to her friend the whole conversation with the nurse. "Well, what are we standing here for? Get dressed. Let's go." "Nancy," I handed Kathy my jacket, but suddenly I realized and took off my shoes. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" Kathy asked me in surprise. "We didn't take the papers." The girl quickly found Molly's passport, medical card, policy, and other documents in the drawer. She knew exactly where the papers were. In the apartment, there was a special drawer there with various documents. She kept her passport there as well. Upon reaching the hospital, Kathy dialed her mother's. The phone number was disconnected again. The girls did not know in which ward Molly was lying, so they had to spend a lot of time to find out. When they found out, it was too late. Kathy's mom had died without regaining consciousness. Upon hearing this news, the girl froze. She couldn't scream or cry. She just sat down and stared at one point. The wife did not understand how to support her friend, what to say to her, how to find the right words, and what could be said to give a person hope. when he lost his closest and dearest soul. She just sat next to her friend and put her arm around her shoulders. A short time later, the girls learned that Kathy's mom had thrown herself in front of a truck in an attempt to commit suicide. The driver reacted quickly and managed to swerve to the side, but still hit Molly tangentially, and she flew into the guardrail. Then the truck driver called an ambulance and went with the victim to the hospital, but the woman died. Kathy could not come to her senses and could not understand why her mother had done that. Neighbors whispered behind the girl's back. Some said that Molly was in a cult, others that she had gone crazy after losing her husband. When her mother died, Kathy had a difficult period. She was not afraid to go to an orphanage because soon she was going to be 18 years old, but she couldn't get used to living without her mother. Despite the fact that they almost did not communicate with her mother, for many years she was at ease with her. And now she was gone, and it was getting very scary and painful. If Kathy did not have Nancy, she would not be able to survive. A year had passed since then. In time, the girl accepted it and calmed down. Kathy worked in her specialty, gaining experience, even though she received a small salary. Nancy got a boyfriend, Ben, and they started renting an apartment together while she bought suitcases. They were both crying, and she told Kathy, "If you need anything, call Good right away." Kathy nodded, the other wiping away her tears. She really didn't want to be alone, but she couldn't keep her friend around forever either. Soon Kathy also met a guy and immediately fell in love with him with no memory. It was after this short relationship that she became pregnant, and it turned the helpless Kathy into a grown woman who learned to solve her problems on her own. "Kathy, are you sleeping in there?" Nancy stretched out, pulling Kathy out of her thoughts. "So, bride-to-be, are you going to play?" "Yes," said Kathy, not expecting it. She heard Nancy's enthusiastic voice and smiled at her reflection in the mirror. "Kathy, you certainly remembered everything." William was very afraid that the meeting would not go as planned and his parents would figure it out. And if that happened, his mom would start fainting. Or should I make a scene? Daddy will blame his son for not raising him that way, and men don't do that. And if James's older brother finds out about the deception, it's going to get really bad. He will remind the boy for a long time how he introduced his parents to a fake bride. William took a deep breath and looked at Kathy. She smiled and quickly retorted, "My name is Helen. I am 24 years old. I work as a translator for your company." "Okay, and no one will decide to test me on my language skills?" the girl asked excitedly. "I guess not," William thought. "No, they definitely won't. Not Mom, not Dad, I don't know. If James were coming, he might. But he won't be here. His wife's about to have a baby. So it'll be all right." Kathy looked William in the eye, smiled, and continued, "Your mom, Evelyn. Your father, Peter. Good for you. I approve more," the boy said. "What's the best thing to talk about with your mom not cooking?" Kathy replied quickly, "Your mom really likes to cook. So if she hears the name of a dish, she'll want to cook it right away." "That's right," said William, looking at his watch. "But talk to your dad about everything. But don't argue, just keep quiet. Agree?" "Okay, sure. So, then everything's fine. My parents are gonna be here any minute, so let's speed it up. Breathe in, breathe out. I wish you all the best of luck." "Yeah, good luck," Kathy muttered quietly. Her anxiety was growing by the minute. She was beginning to regret getting involved in this venture, but she realized that she was doing it not for the money, but because she really liked William. Besides, Kostya liked the man very much. He kept talking about his uncle, who drove them home, and asked when he would come to visit them. "The guest uncle just gave us a ride. We can't invite him to visit," hugging the boy, Kathy said. "It's a pity. I wish I had a daddy like that." Kathy's son stretched out, dreamily closing his eyes. "Oh, I forgot all about the champagne. I'll go get it from the fridge. In the meantime, you sit back and calm down," William said. On his way to the kitchen, only William left the room. The doorbell rang. "Kathy, "Go open the door," shouted William. "I'll be right there." The girl went to the front door and took a deep breath, counted to 3, and opened it. The landing was dark. She could hardly see the man standing in front of her. He was standing half sideways, so she couldn't see his face. Kathy naturally thought it was Papa William, so she loudly said, "Hello, Peter. I'm Helen, William's girlfriend." "Come in, William. I'm in the kitchen now." "Where is it?" But she did not have time to finish the last sentence because she saw the face of the man standing in front of her. It couldn't possibly be William's father. "Hello, Helen," he said with a smile. "I'm James, William's brother." And then the light from the apartment hit the man, and Kathy got a full view of the guy. The girl was speechless, but quickly regaining her senses, she shrieked, "You!" James was surprised and began to stare hard at the girl's face. When he recognized her, he cursed softly and then whispered, "What are you doing here?" "Hi, James. You've already met my fiancée." Just then, William came back from the kitchen. "Her name is Helen. How did you get here? You weren't supposed to be here. Where are Mom and Dad?" Kathy didn't know how to act at all. She was just in a stupor. Of course, she wanted to meet James again and get in his face for doing this to her, but at the moment, she couldn't figure it out. What was the right thing to do? If she started a scandal right now, she'd be setting William up for a lot of trouble. Especially she didn't want to make a fool of herself. James, too, was out of it, unable to control himself, gave Kathy a stern look and turned to his brother and said, "I'll tell you later how I got to you, but for now you go downstairs and help your parents with their suitcases, and you carry their things. Your elevator's broken. I'm gonna rest. Your girlfriend can get me some water. James, water. I'll help my parents." William quickly kicked off his shoes, threw on his jacket, and ran out of the apartment. Kathy looked up at James. She gathered her thoughts, sighed, and wanted to start talking. But no sooner had she opened her mouth than he drove her against the wall and began whispering fiercely in her ear. "Look, I don't understand what you want and what your plans are. How did you even erase your trust in my brother? But I'm not gonna let you deceive him. I was just scaring you, Kathy." She didn't expect that reaction, so she didn't know what to do, which is just, "What do you want from me? How did you even know William was my brother? Did you just decide to finish the thought?" He didn't have time because he heard footsteps and voices outside the door. James stepped away from Kathy just before the door opened, but the girl couldn't move from the shock and just stood there against the wall. "Why are you still on the doorstep?" William asked in surprise. "I thought you had already eaten at the table." "Helen, what are you doing? What's the matter with you?" "James, are you scared? Don't worry about it. It's only at first glance." Formidable tried to joke William, trying to spank the girl from the wall. "Yes, it's all right," James said cheerfully. "We just had a deal." "Helen was so interesting. How did you two meet?" "Hello, Helen. Will you tell me how you met the wall?" Evelyn intervened. William's mother had already disrobed and undressed. She took Kathy under her arm and led her into the dining room. The girl was very confused, but she tried not to show it and answered all the questions. William's mother. William did not understand what was happening to Kathy, but he could not get his head around it. His father and brother, right from the doorstep, started pouring out all the news and telling him what interesting things had happened on the way when everyone sat down at a table. The boy tried to ask Kathy what had happened to her. He whispered, "No one has seen it yet." "Kathy, what's wrong with you? Did something happen?" "Yeah, I'm fine." The girl tried to smile. The atmosphere at the table was beginning to irritate. Peter was making a lot of jokes. Kathy laughed at his jokes and answered a lot of Evelyn's questions in parallel. The girl seemed to have calmed down, but she tried not to look at James. True, he himself tried to get on her nerves as often as possible and asked her stupid and sometimes hurtful questions. She paid no attention to it. But William was getting very angry. "James, I don't understand what's wrong. Why are you always clinging to the line? Honestly, I would have thought you liked her if you didn't have a pregnant wife. I couldn't take it anymore, William said. Well, why wouldn't I? Maybe I did, James grinned. Everyone fell silent, and there was an awkward pause. Evelyn decided to lighten the mood and began to tell interesting and funny stories from William's life. Imagine, Helen calmly said Mother Vita, when Patenka was very small, "Oh Mom," carelessly tone, said James, interrupting to describe the writing mother. You'll have time to tell more about William. Let's find out more about Helena. We don't know anything about her. Say Helen. He said that name with a special intonation. Why do you want William? What's so special about him? And we're all curious. Have you ever been married? Maybe you have children. That sentence was the last straw for Kathy. She would have stood for a lot of things, but not that. It was a terrible bullying on James' part to bring her up with children, so his words made the girl feel very hurt. Kathy jumped up from the table and ran out into the hallway. She hurriedly tightened her jacket and tried to fasten it. She couldn't do the latter. She began to cry with despair. William's voice came to the girl, and almost immediately he appeared in front of her. Kathy, don't go. James just had too much to drink. He's just talking nonsense, William said quietly. Stay. But she was crying, so she didn't want William to look at her. She didn't want to tell the boy what had happened. William understood, moved close to the girl, touched her cheek and wiped away her tears. Then he took her chin and looked her straight in the eye. She didn't resist. She raised her head and looked into William's eyes too. The guy couldn't help himself and gently kissed the girl's lips. It was a completely innocent kiss, but it stirred up a lot of emotions in her. It was as if he relieved the accumulated tension, allowed Kathy to forget about everything and calm down. All that was left was lightness and a sense of flight. William pulled away but was still too close, so she could feel his hot breath. It made her body run with goosebumps. Please don't go away, William said quietly, in a husky voice that noted the striking notes in it. After all, I'd better go. The girl tried to come to her senses more quickly and convey confidence in her voice. You, apologize for me to my parents. Tell them I got sick. You have a good mom and dad. I don't want to hurt them, especially since I've already played my part. I gotta go. While the girl was afraid to change her mind, so she quickly turned around and already went out into the entranceway. But William suddenly said, No, one thing I definitely will not let you go. Wait, I'll warn my parents and see you off. She did not argue and was rolled against the wall in the entryway and began to wait for William. Through the open door, the girl could hear William saying something to his parents. His mother's voice reached her, arguing and speaking in a slightly annoyed tone. We can all go now, William said as he stepped out into the entryway. He was already dressed. Yes, the guy and the girl walked out of the entryway in silence, but William wanted to know what had really happened, so he tried to start a conversation. If you want, can we call a cab? He asked. I'm not going to drive. You know, I've been drinking, but let's walk. I need a breath of fresh air. James hurt you. To be honest, we don't understand with his parents what's wrong with him today. Maybe something happened. He's not making any sense at all. What's he saying? Kathy asked quietly. She realized that William's brother could say some nasty things about her. Of course, she knew that she and William had no future, but she didn't want the guy to treat her badly. She liked him a lot. Well, for example, when I was leaving, he said, You're cheating on all of us. Anyway, James thinks you're not who you say you are. Pull the William. You know, he said it so confidently, like he knows you're not my girlfriend. Because he does know. Kathy answered almost in a whisper. William looked at her in surprise and stopped. I don't get it. How could he possibly know that? Do you know him? Kathy didn't want to answer, so she just kept quiet. But the guy didn't relent and kept pelting her with questions. Well, why didn't he just say that you two knew each other? Was there something between you two? Because wait, The girl touched up to the guy's shoulder to reassure him. I don't really think your brother wants you to know that. We didn't have a very pleasant encounter. I'm sure he's regretted a bunch of times that your dad's car broke down and he had to come over, Kathy said. After all, I'm right that if your dad's car hadn't broken down, James wouldn't have come and recognized someone posing as your fiancé. If it hadn't been for that accident, none of this would have happened. Kathy tried to gather her thoughts, at which point William said, Kathy, why didn't he just pretend he didn't know you? As I recall, you didn't throw a fight at him. Or did I miss something? Of course not. I didn't lash out at him. I was actually shocked when I saw him. I'd be less surprised if it was like Brad Pitt. Why Brad Pitt? The guy smiled slightly. Well, I just like Brad Pitt and his name came to mind, quickly said Kathy. But that's not what this is about right now. Got it. So tell me, how do you know James? Look, why don't you let him tell you? The girl didn't want to talk about her affair with James. She hated to remember how stupid she'd been a few years ago. I'll talk to him too, don't worry. But right now, I want to hear your side of the story. As far as I can tell, it's not a pleasant story. So I'd like to hear both sides of the story. Kathy exhaled loudly, clenched her fists, said James. Bones' father. What? William shrieked loudly. Passing by an old lady with a dog on a leash, even jumped with fear and said loudly, You are not ashamed. Young man, you can't behave like that. I beg your pardon. William replied sharply. He was not interested in being polite and wanted to know the details. William stared at Kathy in silence, and the old woman, who had recently been frightened by the boys shouting, began to come closer and closer to them. She was curious as to what they were talking about. Kathy noticed this and relented. The woman, with an annihilating stare. The granny gave the girl a displeased look and grabbed her chit in her arms and carried her away. I told you that our history of acquaintance with James is not the most pleasant, Kathy said in a calm tone. But I didn't expect this, either, said William, who had recovered from the shock. But I don't understand how. How can he be the father of the bone? I mean, he lives in another city and doesn't come here. There's just no way. The guy started to shift to screaming again. He was having a hard time keeping his cool right now, and there were many reasons for that. He liked the girl so much that he even wanted to ask her out on a date or invite them and their bones, for example, to the circus or to the Christmas tree. What the guy found out changed everything. He did not know how he should act now, how to behave. And in general, the news that James has a child, which he does not bring up, was in itself shocking. For William, his brother had always been an example and authority. But such an act held James back in William's eyes. William had always wanted to look up to her older brother. James was a cheerful, athletic build with great ambition. But the fact that he abandoned his own child undermined James' authority completely. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. You didn't tell me how we met, the guy reminded him. He was afraid Kathy would go home now and he'd never find out. I literally fell at his feet quietly, said the girl. Well, how about a little more detail? They were almost at Kathy's house, and William began to realize that she was just stalling and didn't want to say anything. But he couldn't just let her go. My friend Nancy asked me out on a double date. Her boyfriend Ben was supposed to bring his friend. The girl started the story. She'd been wanting to set me up with someone for a long time, but I hadn't said yes. That day, I finally gave in. Kathy sighed heavily. We went to a club, and this guy at the club had a few too many drinks and started hitting on me. And then he dragged me to the bathroom. Well, you know what for. Freak, William gritted his teeth. He was terribly angry at the girl's story. His face was twisted with anger. Yes, I agree with you, Kathy. I couldn't see William's face because it was already dark outside, so she didn't pay attention to his condition. That's what I told him then, and then I decided to leave. Nancy wanted to walk me out, but I said I'd call a cab. And I wanted to walk. I was wearing terribly uncomfortable shoes, long stilettos. so it was very difficult for me to walk. I almost made it home though, and I was just passing that store. Kathy turned around and pointed William toward the store they had just passed. The boy nodded as a sign that he understood. My heel got stuck between the tiles. I twisted my foot and started to fall. James was just coming out of the store, but of course I didn't know that was his name at the time. So he helped me up and offered to walk me home, Kathy said. And William just listened silently. He walked me home, and we stood talking for a long time near the driveway. Then Ben offered to have coffee, but I didn't invite him in. He walked me out, and we stood chatting for a long time. Then James offered to have coffee, but I didn't invite him back to my place. So we went and got takeout coffee and went back to the driveway. We chatted some more, and I went home. Then Ben called me, asked me out. We went to a movie, then to a cafe. And so began our brief romance. The girl finished dryly. They were already standing just outside her house. She wanted to close the door quickly to finish this unpleasant conversation. And then what happened? William persisted. You'd have to ask your brother. I think you'll like his version better. Kathy turned around and wanted to go into the entryway, but William grabbed her arm tightly. Please tell me what happened next. She looked him straight in the eyes, in the lamplight. He saw that there were tears in her eyes. He realized that she did not want to tell him anything more, that she wanted to run away, to hide. But he couldn't let her go because it was important for him to know the truth. He tried to ignore the girl's tears, which rolled down her face in large drops. The boy repeated his question. Kathy, what happened next? Next, you wondered. What happened next? Shouted the girl and pulled her hand out of the man's hand. What happened next was the happiest months of my life, you know. I fell in love with James, and I was willing to do anything for him. And I was sure he would love me back as much as I loved him. But it turned out I was wrong. I was so stupid, and he took advantage of it. The girl covered her face with her hands, turned away from William, and cried harder. The boy was silent. He didn't know what to do. He realized that the girl would not go anywhere and would tell him everything. But now he was worried about something else. He couldn't deal with his emotions. William wanted incredibly badly to give in to the urge and hug her. This fragile and helpless girl. He wanted not just to hug her, but to hold her with all his strength and comfort her like a little girl. He would certainly have given in to this impulse if it had not been about his brother, but about some other strange man. But unfortunately, the girl was telling a story about James, so William had to make an effort not to hold her against him right now. He just hid his hands in his pockets where he clenched and balled his fists. It helped a little, distracted him, and calmed him down. And then 2 months later, James was gone. Kathy continued the story. Her voice had changed a lot. It sounded muffled and detached. Tears were no longer running down her cheeks, and her face was pale and frightened. You see, the man I loved just disappeared without saying a word to me. She spoke in a cold voice full of pain. I called him all day, all night, and another day, but he just disconnected the phone. I almost lost my mind. I was afraid that something had happened to him. So I went to the police, but they just laughed at me. They said my lover was just fed up with me. So he disappeared. Do you know what the worst part is? Kathy looked William straight in the eye, that after the words of the police I came to my senses. I started to realize everything. After all, I didn't know anything about this guy I'd been seeing for the past 2 months. I didn't even know his last name or where he worked, for example. William couldn't believe she was telling this about James. He had no reason not to trust Kathy. The boy could see the pain in her eyes as she told her story. William believed her, and he was getting really nasty. So disgusting he wanted to go to the showers to wash the filth off himself. Well, anyway, I was completely depressed. I didn't want to live. I couldn't work. I couldn't eat. I couldn't leave the house. All I could do was lie there and stare at the ceiling. If it hadn't been for Nancy's support, I would have done something to myself. Kathy wrinkled her nose as if her patriarchy was howling at these horrible events. And soon after, I found out I was pregnant. Kathy, I apologize, of course, for that question. Are you sure Liam is James? William said it and immediately regretted his words. Kathy changed abruptly. She looked at the boy with eyes full of hatred, her face twisted with anger. The girl pulled out and gave Veda a ringing slap of evil, saying at the same time, "Male solidarity is right," shouted Kathy. "I don't care if you think your brother is white and fluffy. That's your business. But you asked me to tell you everything. And I told you as hard as it was. It wasn't for me. I'm sorry I met you and agreed to help you. Goodbye." She quickly turned around and ran toward the entryway. "Kathy, wait," shouted William. "I didn't mean that. I'm sorry." But the girl had already run to the entrance and slammed the door behind her. Kathy got to the apartment and opened the door with the key. She sank to the floor right in the hallway and began to sob as loudly as she could. She was utterly desperate, and she was really, really hurting. William walked home, immersed in his thoughts. He blamed himself for saying words that hurt the girl, but there was no way he could fix it. Besides, he tried to think about the future conversation with his brother. The conversation would definitely have to take place. The boy would not be able to sleep until he heard James's version of what had happened with Kathy. William walked into Evelyn's apartment. She had already put everything away and washed the dishes. She was now sitting in an armchair watching her favorite show. Peter was sitting on the couch, dozing. James was nowhere to be seen. "So how badly did Helen resent James?" asked worried mother. The boy did not understand who his mother was talking about, but then it came to him. And William said, "No, she's fine. She's just a little sick. But to be honest, I'm totally shocked by my brother's behavior. Yes, son. I don't know what happened to him. He was different. I tried to talk to him afterwards to find out what was wrong with his behavior, but he wouldn't tell me anything. I mean, he said something, but my father and I didn't understand. All right, Mom, I'll talk to him myself. Go to bed. You're leaving tomorrow, aren't you?" "Yes, of course we are. We're driving a serious car, and his girlfriend's due soon. He can't be away for too long." The mother said her daughter-in-law's name in a special tone of voice. She was never able to accept her son's wife and love her. Well, she kind of accepted her. But here the daughter-in-law was shy mother-in-law and avoided communicating with her. The guy did not know what exactly happened between his mother and Emily and never got involved with questions. It was none of his business, and now he didn't bother his mom, kissed her cheek, covered with a thin web of wrinkles, and said, "Okay, Mom, I'll go. Good night. Lead the way, please, but don't swear, James. Remember, he's your brother." "Yes, yes, of course," replied William and smiled. He did not realize that he would soon forget that he was related to James. William entered the room and saw that his brother was already asleep on the bed. He couldn't and didn't want to wait until morning, so he started to wake him up. "James, wake up." William shook his brother by the shoulder. He opened his eyes, tried to focus his gaze on William, and said, "Get off me. Let me sleep." "No, James, come on, get up. We need to talk." "What conversation?" "Just James trying to sit up in bed. And yourself do not guess about your behavior, about your attitude to my fiancé," replied William. The guy did not call the girl by name, so that his brother could tell him everything. "Listen, this is your favorite bride, Helen. It's not Helen at all. Her name is Kathy, and I think she has a kid." James answered, "Really? How do you know that?" "Well, about the name and the baby," William asked in a surprised tone. James gave his brother a confused look. He realized that he had said too much, but he wanted to protect William from this girl's deception. In truth, he didn't want to talk to his brother about it at all. "After all, I do not want to go into details. You just need to take my word for it that this girl is not your match at all. But I'm serious." "No way, James," William said. "No way. I want to know everything from the very beginning to the very end, from the story of your acquaintance to the moment why you left her pregnant. As William walked home, you were still hoping that James didn't know about Kathy's pregnancy, but now, looking at him, he realized that his brother knew everything. He didn't understand how James could leave her so easily and not be involved in his own son's life. "All right, if you want to, I'll tell you. But I have a condition." James grinned. "What's that?" "Not my parents, not my wife, can't know about this." William thought for a moment, then said, "Okay, I promise I won't tell." He didn't want to tell anyone himself. His parents would be very upset about it. And he didn't want to ruin his brother's family because his wife was about to have a baby. "But I'm waiting impatiently," said William. "How long are you going to keep quiet? Come on, start talking. Don't rush me. Let me get my thoughts together," said James thoughtfully. "I don't know where to start." "Well, tell me, for example, where did you meet? And in general, how did you end up in this city?" "You have no idea," James said with a laugh. "You really don't remember. You moved here and bought an apartment. And about a month later, I came to this town. Do you remember when Emily's father opened a branch of the company here and asked me to supervise?" "I remember," William nodded. "Okay, that's taken care of. Now let's get on to getting to know Kathy. Did you know that my introduction to Kathy was your fault?" James smiled. "If it hadn't been for you, I never would have met her." "I don't know what you mean, my fault. But it was you who sent me to your apartment late at night to check on the repairs." "That's the day I met Kathy." William remembered that when his brother had come to visit, he had actually asked him to check on the apartment several times. At that time, William had just moved to this city, but he had prepared for the move in advance, found a job, bought an apartment, started to renovate the apartment, but did not have time to finish it. The company management demanded that he go to work. So William hired a team of builders, and they began to finish his initial repair. The guy himself stayed in rented accommodation for the time being. William all the time disappeared in the office, so there was no time to check the work of the masters. Then James came to town, and William immediately told him that it would not be possible to stay in his apartment because of the repairs. During the time James was in town, William only met him a few times, but James often checked his brother's apartment at his request to keep an eye on the workers. One day, William asked James to check on the apartment late at night. He got a call from a neighbor telling him that something was going on there. Loud music was playing, girls were laughing, and a speaker was working. This alarmed the neighbor, so she called William just to warn him. "After all, I couldn't get away from work, so I asked to check my brother's apartment. Apparently, that's the day he met Senia. But what did you remember?" James smiled, watching William's reaction. He nodded. "Yeah, I guessed, probably when I went to check on the apartment after the neighbor called. Let's say you met Kathy. But it's not like I made you drag her to bed." A little angrily, William said, "You were getting ready to get married at the time. And anyway, I thought you were really in love with Emily." "Love with Emily?" James started to shout hysterically, but quickly lowered his voice so as not to wake his parents. "What love? What do you even know about our relationship with Emily?" "I myself have never understood why you with this girl," talked William, who always hid his attitude to his brother's chosen one. "No, she's certainly a beautiful, showy girl, but it's as if she has no soul in her. I remember that you never showed any sympathy for her. So you were surprised when you decided to get married." "Surprised?" James stretched out. "Why did I suddenly decide to go out with her?" "I didn't have the wit." William shrugged nonchalantly. It was strange to him that his brother was talking to him that way, and that there was so much irritation and anger in his voice. The longer the brothers talked, the more questions William had. James's story was not yet clear. He wanted to know more quickly. "Tell me that the money had made him sound squeamish." "Yes, dear brother, you wouldn't believe it, but you guessed right," James said with a chuckle. "To be exact, my father-in-law did everything. So I had no choice. I got so deep in business with him that I just couldn't get out, James clarified, looking somewhere through his brother. He was silent for a few moments, thinking for a moment, then continued. William realized that his brother, who had always been hiding something, had finally decided to speak up. He just couldn't keep it all to himself. James remained silent for a few minutes, thinking, gathering his thoughts, and then continued again. The first time I met Emily's father was at her birthday party. We were at her house. There were about 15 people there. At one point, Emily's dad came over, and the guys started going home. It was just me, Emily, and about 4 other people. He saw us drinking, but he didn't say a word. He just sat down at the table and asked for a clean plate to eat his dinner. I wanted to leave too, but the birthday girl tearfully asked me to stay. So, giving in to her entreaties, I stayed a little longer. James said in a calm voice, and then exclaimed, I was a fool. If I had left, my life would have been very different. James. Oh, don't give me that. William waved him away. As usual, you have everyone to blame but yourself. The boy didn't even try to hide his irritation. It hurt him that the image of the perfect older brother was crumbling before his eyes. And he was also disappointed that now their relationship with his brother would forever change for the better. William was sure of it. Okay, look, why don't I just leave it at that? James grumbled unhappily. He'd hoped his brother would be supportive. But William wasn't going to sympathize with him. So James went on with his story. Okay, Nick's presence made us a little uncomfortable at first, but as time went on, we relaxed. Emily's father talked to us, asked us all kinds of questions, and we answered him. The conversation was quite relaxed. He asked me where I was going to go to college. At first, I didn't want to answer because I was sure that I wouldn't be able to get into the university I dreamed of. But Nick wouldn't back down, so I told him everything. He grinned strangely and left the room. And when he came back, he had a sheet in his hand on which he asked me to write down my information. Name, phone number, the date of birth I did as he said, and gave the sheet back. I finally got accepted, and that's when it hit me. That Emily's father helped you get in. William interrupted his brother. Yeah, sort of, James replied. To be more precise, I was helped by a friend of his, who was a rector at the university. He and Nick used to go to the sauna on Saturdays. After that, he helped me with my job too. How? You said you were lucky. You won some competition, and you were offered the job. William said in surprise. What else was I supposed to tell you? I just wanted Mom and Dad to be proud of me and think that I'd achieved everything on my own, James said quietly. And I was thrilled that I was able to get into the institute of my dreams. Then I got a good, high-paying job. I even started dating a girl, Anna, whom I liked very much. But it was not as easy as I thought. What do you mean? William wondered. I believe that I was just lucky to meet such a kind and influential man as Nick. Ignoring his brother, James continued to speak, but then I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was Emily's father, who asked me to come to his office. He said he had something urgent to talk to me about. I went, of course, because I had no idea what was going to happen next. There was silence, but William already knew how this story would end. He couldn't believe that James had really gotten himself into such a terrible mess. William was an honest and upright man and was sure his brother was the same. But this filth that is part of his brother's life came as a shock. James wanted to finish the story quickly, so he continued. When I arrived at Nick's workplace, we had an interesting conversation. He asked me how I felt about his daughter, if I liked her, and if I would like to date her. I replied that she was a nice girl, and I felt great about her, but immediately told him about Anna, that I was in love with her and we were dating. He reacted to my response with resentment, saying that his daughter has been going crazy for a long time, and he would love it if I dumped my Anna and started dating Emily. I tried to explain that this is impossible. I only see Emily as my friend. I talked for a long time trying to make it as friendly as possible. But Nick wouldn't listen. Anyway, at some point, Nick changed the subject and started asking about my studies and work. I told him everything was great, and he replied that it would be a pity if I was expelled and fired. To his words, I don't understand. Also objected that I have everything excellent in the institute and at work. For what reasons could I be expelled and fired? He only then grinned and wished me luck. About a week later, the instructor tried to fail me on an exam. He asked questions that we had not studied at all during the semester. Money went missing at work, and the shortage was pinned on me. I understood why it was happening, and I didn't want to go along with Emily's father. You could have asked your parents for help. So what happened? Where are we and where is Emily's father, who owns a big business and knows a lot of powerful people? Don't be ridiculous, Will. Are you exaggerating? William tried to object. I don't think your father-in-law is as omnipotent as you describe. No, brother, James said with a chuckle. Maybe I'm understating things, but I'm certainly not exaggerating. I didn't realize what an authority figure he was before either, but now I know what extensive connections and influential friends he has. So do I go on, or are we going to argue? Go ahead. Anyway, after that conversation, I started having problems. I was trying to keep up, and I was torn between my uni job and Anna. When I was almost out of energy, Nick called me again. He asked me how I was doing, how my studies were, how my job was. Asked me to come up to his office again. There he offered to help me, that he could work things out. But in exchange, I had to go out with Emily, and he had one condition. Emily must never find out about our arrangement. I didn't want to agree honestly, but I was well aware that if I refused, Nick would get to me for good. James was silent for a moment, and then said in a quiet, calm tone, "Do you know, William, what was the hardest thing for me to do?" "What?" "Dumping Anna. I really liked her. I've never felt that way about anyone before, but I chose money, career, and comfort." With a slight chuckle, said James, "You have nothing at all for Veronica." William was important to know that. Well, how can I put it? James stretched out. I don't love her, but she makes me feel safe and good. No fire, no passion. It's hard for me to explain. It's just a habit. We live and let live. But if my father-in-law hadn't encouraged me to get involved with Emily, I never would have started seeing her. William sighed heavily. He hated hearing all this, but they hadn't gotten to the hardest part of his brother's story yet. "All right," William said. "I think we're clear on Emily. But wait, there's something else I want to clarify." "What?" James looked at his brother in surprise. "Don't be shy, I'm asking. It's her night of revelations, so you can find out anything you want to know. Why didn't you just leave Emily? I mean, you had some problems and you were separated. Why did you go back to her if you didn't love her? I think that's when you started getting ready to get married." "So much. Why?" James muttered. "I don't know why. I guess I just got used to it. To her beautiful life, to her lack of problems. I realized that as soon as I leave her, I'll be fired from my job, and I'll lose everything I've worked so hard to achieve. My father-in-law would never forgive me. I was trapped. Emily did a lot to make me want to leave her, though. Then one day, she changed. Started being jealous of me at every post, checking my social media accounts, calling me hysterically all the time. But I never had a chance to change her. We were always there for each other. I only left for work. If I started an affair there, someone would immediately knock Nick," James muttered. "Well, then I don't understand how she let you go on a business trip for 2 whole months. It's just a coincidence, I guess," my brother replied. "I didn't expect to be so lucky at all," the man said. "The stars have aligned just right. First of all, I didn't ask for this trip. Nick sent me. He loves his daughter, of course, but she tries not to argue with him. Secondly, she couldn't come with me because her father had just found her a great place to build a beauty parlor. She has long dreamed of her own business, so she could not miss such an opportunity. After all, it was necessary to quickly draw up the documents and start making repairs. and Emily wanted to control the whole process from start to finish. Anyway, she agonized for a long time, but decided that everything would be all right. She couldn't miss the opportunity to realize herself and show everyone that she could do everything herself. Got it. She fulfilled her dream. As far as I know, her salon is doing well. William clarified. Yes, it's doing well. But that's not her fault. It's Nick's, James said, waving his hand. But that's not what this is about. I left for this town, and Emily's been calling me almost every hour to check on me, to see what I was up to. She wanted to come over a bunch of times, but I kept calming her down. It wasn't very far away, so I drive myself to see her. And then things kind of settled down. She got busy with the salon, so she just didn't have time to control me. That's where Kathy came in. So, you met her and immediately decided to cheat on your girlfriend. I interrupted my brother, William. No, of course not. I wasn't going to cheat on anyone. It's just the smell of freedom. You know, it's a bonding experience. The first time I saw Kathy, she was upside down, trying to keep her balance, you know. Well, she's got a nice ass, so I couldn't resist. I decided to help the lovely girl. William was silent. He listened attentively to his brother, but he didn't like the words that Kathy had a nice ass. It made him feel something unpleasant. James didn't notice the change in his brother, so he just continued with his story. When Kathy changed, I saw that she was okay in the front too. Nice face, nice breasts, waist, legs all on her. That's how we got it going. James smiled. And you know what struck me most? Said William in a lost voice, who realized that his feelings of resentment and hatred for his brother were growing more and more. She was a virgin. James laughed, emphasizing the last word. I couldn't believe it when she told me. I thought she was just putting on an act. But when we got to the point, and I realized she wasn't lying, I was very. But James didn't have time to finish, because William jumped up and punched his brother. James hadn't expected such a turn, so he didn't even have time to dodge. The fist hit him squarely in the jaw. That's why there was blood coming out of his lip. What are you doing? Shouted at the top of his voice James. You'll be quiet. William whispered angrily. Are you out of your mind? James asked, surprised by his brother's behavior. William said, holding out a handkerchief to James. Whereupon I said, I'm not at all. I'm just shocked that you, my brother, played with a girl and then left her pregnant. How could you do that? I thought my brother was a real man who could take responsibility for his actions. And he was. William waved his hand at his brother and headed out of the room. And you're so right, aren't you? James grinned, pressing his handkerchief to his lips. I'm just a normal person, living the way my parents taught me, and I don't do anything mean. I don't understand why you're so full of shit, William said hatefully and walked over to his brother. He didn't want to talk to him, but he had to know everything to the end. So he asked the main question. Tell me, did you know that Kathy was expecting a child? I didn't know anything when I left, James said, touching his lip and wincing at the pain. His jaw ached terribly, blood was coming out, and James was angry at his brother, at himself, and at Kathy, who was to blame for everything, according to the man. When you found out she was pregnant, after a while she somehow inexplicably found me on social networks and wrote honestly. I was shocked when I saw her message. I mean, she didn't even know my last name. The SIM card, the number of which she knew and immediately threw away. It was a working, simple phone at work, said that I lost it. They gave me a new one. Why'd you run away? You didn't even call her or break up with her like a real jerk. And when you found out she was pregnant, you didn't contact her either. Why not? Yours again. Why did James get angry? You're asking why. What could I possibly have said to her? I don't know, William said in a near whisper. You could have at least said a proper goodbye instead of just disappearing. Do you really think that's what she wanted? With a chuckle, James answered, wincing at the pain of the blow. Probably not. William shrugged. But when she told you she was pregnant, why didn't you contact her? That's what I don't understand. So what? What difference would it have made? James asked harshly, looking his brother straight in the eye. William just shook his head, and James continued. Exactly. It wouldn't have changed anything. I wasn't going to break up with Emily, so I didn't answer Kathy. I'd had a good time with her, of course, but that wasn't it. With her, I felt like a student who couldn't afford luxury gifts for a girl. She glowed with happiness when I brought her a crumpled rose bought in the underpass, or offered to drink coffee and eat a hiked dosha. But I didn't want to live like that. Emily and my father-in-law showed me a very different life, a more expensive one. I guess I would have understood you and could justify you somehow, said William. But I will never understand how you could not even ask about your child's fate. Stop, James said with a chuckle. Actually, I only knew about the pregnancy, the baby, and she didn't tell me. Kathy disappeared and never wrote to me again. That's why I thought she'd had an abortion. Shut up, William threw. I don't even want to hear it. You're just a coward and a moral freak. I'm ashamed that you're my brother. William left the room. The apartment was already quiet. Apparently, the parents were asleep. The guy tried to walk as quietly as possible to the corridor, took his jacket, and went out into the entrance. He didn't want to stay in the apartment. He needed a breath of fresh air immediately. This conversation had ruined his relationship with his brother, most likely forever. Kathy sat on the couch, holding the bones in her lap. They were looking at the multicolored lights on the Christmas tree. The girl was sad. Christmas was due in a couple hours, and Kathy was trying to understand. Why was she feeling so homesick? It hadn't been a bad year. Liam had hardly been sick at all. She'd gotten a pay rise and life had gotten a lot easier. In fact, she understood everything. It was William and his sneaky brother who had spoiled her impression of the past year. She regretted having met William because it made her have to remember one of the worst events in her life. After Kathy had slapped William back, she thought he would never appear in her life again. But that turned out not to be the case. He called her all the next day, but she didn't pick up. He kept calling and calling. So Kathy just blacklisted him. But that didn't help the girl calm down either. She wanted to get away from sad thoughts and heavy memories, so she looked at her son and asked Liam, "What do you think Santa Claus will put under your Christmas tree?" Kathy already knew the answer to that question. Liam dreamed of a railroad, but the one her son really liked cost too much. The girl simply could not afford such a purchase. But fortunately, she had a best friend who was happy to help Kathy out. "What's the matter, Kathy? Aren't I adding money for my godson's dream?" Indignantly, Nancy opened her wallet and added the missing amount to Kathy. The girl couldn't wait to fulfill her son's dream. But when she heard the answer to her question, she was simply shocked. "I want a daddy," clearly uttered the child. Daddy stretched out the girl in surprise, but Bone. "They don't put dads under Christmas trees." "Too bad," the boy sighed heavily. "I would have liked that so much. Why does everyone at daycare have dads and I don't?" Kathy wanted to answer her son's question, but then the doorbell rang. "So I'll go and see who it is that came to us, and we'll talk," the girl said calmly. "Who you think it might be?" Kathy knew that Nancy and Ben had gone to the Alps for the holidays, so it certainly wasn't them, and no one else could have come to them. "Who's there?" asked Kathy, and looked through the peephole. "Santa Claus" was heard from behind the door. "But I didn't order it." "Did you make a mistake?" shouted the girl, not planning to open the door. Liam could see the animator and get upset, and she had no money, offered her a discount. But even with it, the price for Santa Claus services was exorbitant. The girl moved away from the door, but the call was repeated. "What on earth do you want?" grumbled Kathy, and opened the door. "I didn't order Santa Claus," clearly said the girl, so that the man understood her. "We can talk." Santa Claus skipped the beard a little, and Kathy recognized him immediately. It was William in his Santa Claus costume. He looked great, like he was a real fairy tale wizard, But Kathy wasn't impressed with the surprise. "No, go away," through gritted teeth, she said, trying to speak as quietly as possible. "We have nothing to talk about. I've played the part. We shouldn't see each other anymore. Goodbye." "Kathy, why are you doing this to me?" "Yeah, my brother's a jerk, but it's not my fault. It's not fair to me. It's not fair." The girl was surprised. "You can't deny me the opportunity to communicate with my own nephew," the guy said seriously. "Come on with your nephew. You doubt it's your brother's son. We have nothing to talk about," shouted Kathy and slammed the door. "Mom, who's that?" Liam suddenly stepped out into the hallway. "No one just made a mistake," said the girl. She took her son by the hand and led him into the hall. But then the doorbell rang again. "I told you you were wrong. Goodbye," Kathy shouted angrily, loud enough to be heard outside the door. "Who's that?" asked the boy, coming close to the door. Santa Claus came from William's cheerful bass. Mommy, it's Santa Claus. Open up quickly," joyfully shouted the boy, clapping his hands. "Son, Uncle's joking. It's not Santa Claus," said the girl to her son and turned to the door. "I told you to go away. I'll call the police." The girl hoped this would scare William into leaving. But no, the guy rang the doorbell again. Kathy sighed heavily, and the boy ran to the door again and shouted, "Who's there?" "It's Santa Claus. I brought you presents. I know your name is." Liam spoke William to the boy. He realized that only with the help of his nephew would he be able to get into the apartment. "I'm right. I also know you've been good all year, so you'll get presents." Liam stood by the door, holding his breath. Kathy was terribly angry, so she swung the doors open to put the guy in his place, but immediately regretted her decision. Liam saw Santa Claus and rushed over to hug him. "It's the real Santa Claus. Mommy, look, Santa Claus even knows my name. And you didn't want to let him in. But he's real." Excitedly, the child shouted all the way down the stairs. He grabbed Santa Claus by the sleeve and started dragging him into the apartment. "Santa Claus, come on in. We've got potatoes and a nice salad. Come on in, we got a treat for you." The girl realized she couldn't get rid of William now. The guy was fun. He gladly stepped into the apartment and went with the boy to the table. Kathy, however, tried to show her displeasure, but she failed. She was pleased to see William playing with her son and how happy the child was. Strangely enough, they quickly found a common language. Liam was diligently telling Santa Claus a poem he had recently learned with his mother. "What did you get a present for?" "A huge construction set." The boy just squealed with happiness. "Well, now Kathy closes his eyes and you. Santa Claus has presents for everyone," said William. "No, I'm a big girl now, Kathy." I tried not to look at him. "So what? Girls get presents too, don't they, Liam?" Santa Claus said cheerfully and winked at the boy. "Mom, come on, closing your eyes and putting your palms up." "Come on, Kathy, closing your eyes and putting up your palms." The girl stubbornly shook her head negatively, but then Liam intervened in the conversation. "Mom, why are you so mean? You can't argue with Santa Claus. Let's close it. Please, Mom." Santa Claus is now offended and will leave and will never come to us again, he said. The girl had to obey. She closed her eyes and reached out her hand to William. Suddenly, something small and cold touched her hand. Kathy opened her eyes and saw a bracelet with a small pendant that said family on it. "Kathy, you are my family now." William spoke softly, looking into her eyes. For the rest of the evening, Kathy was overcome with confused feelings. On the one hand, she was happy. She felt incredibly warm watching William play with her son. She had never seen Kostya so happy. The boy ran up to his mom all evening and said, "Mom, we have a real Santa Claus visiting us. Can you imagine? A real one." Kathy only smiled in response to his words. On the other hand, she was afraid. She was afraid that when the chime struck, William would disappear and she would be left alone again with a child who lacked male attention. It was 11:40 on the clock. Liam suddenly fell asleep right on the floor next to the new constructions that Santa Claus had given him. "Move him to the bed," William asked in a whisper, looking at Kathy. She nodded. The man took the sleeping boy in his arms and carried him into the room. The boy was so tired from playing with the fairy wizard that he didn't even wake up. William laid him on the bed and covered him with a blanket. He didn't want to think about his brother at all, who had decided to cowardly run away the morning after the conversation. But he couldn't just run away like that. Nervous, he quickly pulled up his shoes, causing him to drop his shoes en masse. His mom woke up from the rumble. "Ben, where are you going?" asked the worried woman. Peter appeared behind her, and William, who stood and tried to hide a wry smile. But he wasn't very good at it. "Hey, Mom, it wasn't Emily who called. I think she's in labor." James lied, trying not to look at Evelyn. "I have to leave right away." "How are we going to get there?" asked William and James' father. The parents were very surprised that their son wanted to just run away without telling them anything. "We don't have a car. How are we going to get there? I thought you said you could drive us to your aunt's." "Well, nothing. You'll figure it out somehow." Threw the guy quickly ran out of the apartment. "Go catch up with him," said William's mother. "Or rather, let him wait for us while we get ready." William ran after his brother, but not to persuade him to come back. He just wanted to look into his eyes one more time and say a few words of farewell. He didn't like it, of course, but he needed to finish last night's conversation. James had already gotten into the car and was about to close the door, but then he heard his brother's voice. "But you're a coward. I thought you'd think about it and tell Mom and Dad. If your son doesn't have a normal father, he could have loving grandparents and an uncle. And you turned out to be such a coward, running away with your tail between your legs again." The boy looked at his brother with contempt. He really wanted to hit him again, but he held back because he realized that his mother was watching them from the window. "Who are you to tell me how to live my life?" James hissed through his teeth. "I'm not going to lose everything I have because of a mistake I made a few years ago because of some girl's momentary weakness." William would not listen to him. He knew that if he stayed, he wouldn't be able to help himself. They would fight again. He turned and walked toward the driveway. If his mother saw him hit him, he would have to tell them everything, but he didn't want to. Why would he? It wouldn't do anyone any good. So William tried to keep his common sense and just walk away. "Wait," James called out to his brother. "Well," William turned to him. "Now you're going to tell the parents everything about Kathy, about the baby." "No, but if I were you, I'd do it myself." "But you're a coward." William smirked. "That's right. I'm sure you won't," James said, ignoring his brother's words. "That's right. It's not my truth." William climbed the stairs, but he was in no hurry to enter the apartment. He was too annoyed, so he wanted to calm down a little. He didn't want to tell anyone anything, not even because he was worried about his parents' reaction. He felt sorry for James' wife and future child. The guy didn't want to interfere in someone else's life and ruin his brother's marriage. But he really wanted to support Kathy and her son, who his brother didn't care about. William decided that he wanted to socialize with them, to help them. But he didn't realize that very soon he would love them with all his heart. Ben did leave after all, Evelyn asked excitedly. "I saw him out the window. Why didn't you stop him?" her mother began to ask. His mom called him Emily. "She's very worried and not feeling well." James is worried. He decided to go to her. Took William, looking his mother in the eye. Evelyn said confused, "Well, how are we going to get there? We were going to visit our aunt and other relatives." "Listen, Mom, take my car. I don't need it now anyway. You pay me back for the holidays and I'll drag you home." "I'll do that." "Yes, that would be great, son." The woman was happy. Kathy sat at the table and nervously looked at his watch. William's parents were about to arrive, and she couldn't calm down. "Kathy, pull yourself together," William said quietly and put his arm around the girl's shoulders. "Everything will be all right, I promise." But she hardly listened to him. She was terribly nervous and couldn't help it. The doorbell rang. It made Kathy look very pale. William went to open it. "Hi." "Hi, Dad." The girl heard the cheerful voice of William. "Well, how did it go out?" "Great, and I want to introduce you to my favorite girl." "Meet her," said the guy, entering the living room. "This is Kathy." "So we're Evelyn," she started to say, but immediately glassed. "Kathy, you said this was Helen. I don't understand anything anymore." "William, please explain." The woman slowly sank down on the chair. Peter did the same. "Yes, of course, now," said the guy, gathering his thoughts last time. "I deceived you a little. I didn't really have a girlfriend, Lena. I said so you wouldn't worry about how my personal life was turning out. But when you said you were coming to meet my fiancé, I was terrified. So I started looking for someone who could play this difficult role. But things didn't go according to plan. And I did find my love, Kathy," said the guy, hugged Kathy, and smiled at his parents. "So, wait, Mom. Give all the details later," interrupted the guy. "You wanted me to be happy. I am now happier than ever," said William, and paused. "What else? I also have a son." "What? What son?" For Evelyn looked completely confused. "I don't understand." "Kathy's pregnant." "No, but she has a beautiful boy named Liam. I want to marry Kathy and adopt him. But that's a big responsibility. Someone else's baby." "No, Mom, it's not someone else's baby. He's my own, and I love him." "You will too, I'm sure," said the kid. "Really? Kathy, call your wife. Have her bring Liam over." William looked at Kathy, who had been sitting still the whole time. The girl flinched as if coming out of a stupor and ran to the phone. Evelyn wanted to take advantage of the moment when the girl left the room and talked to her son. But when she looked at him and saw how much love and happiness was in his eyes, she didn't interfere. The woman decided that life would put everything in its place. And life did. Evelyn and Peter really fell in love with grandson Liam. Grandma Dasha looked at the boy and did not understand why he looked so much like little William. Exactly like William, not like his biological father. The fact that Bones' daddy was James, they never found out. William and Kathy didn't want to tell. They were fine as they were. James tried to communicate with his relatives as little as possible. He was afraid of losing everything if the truth came out. The man had achieved too much to lose everything because of what he said was a mistake. He loved money, he loved luxury. But if Emily found out about the affair and the baby, his father-in-law would strip him of everything he had. So for the sake of keeping the secret, he was ready to give up even the nearest and dearest people. Everyone was happy. Kathy was happy with William and Liam, who was surrounded by the care of not only mom and dad, but also grandparents. This was something the boy could never have dreamed of. And James was happy, surrounded by power and money, an unloved wife, and a father-in-law who was killing the man more and more. Everyone had something they aspired to. Well, who's right? Life will show.